Alright, so in this video, we're going to take a look at how we can get our player to pick up an object. And we basically want the player to walk over to this object, we hit a button, we pick up the object, and then move it to a different location and put it down. Just your classic pick up something, pick up a box, pick up a rock, and place it somewhere else. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that with Game Creator. First things first, let me go ahead and show you exactly what that's going to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And once that loads up, basically we have our player here. And I've already went through the trouble of making this work. And for demonstration, I just hit the P key. And I'm going to walk around and I'm going to drop this item down here. And we're going to pick up this box here. Pick it up and move it right over here. Perfect. And everything is working perfectly. And so that's what we're going to do today. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on that. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and remove this from the scene. I'm just gonna go ahead and make it inactive. And I already have a player here. I'm gonna go ahead and make that player active. And in this player, we don't have anything going on. We just have basically our player character. And if you already have your scene, you just go ahead and add a player character by hitting create player by clicking this diamond shaped icon in the toolbar. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is create a empty object here, an empty game object, and I'm going to rename this empty game object to player, or let's just say mechanics, and we'll just call it mechanics. And basically the idea of this is any mechanics that we create for our player, I want to put them in here. And in this case, I'm going to create one called a jump mechanic. I'm sorry, not a jump mechanic, but a pickup mechanic. And so what I'm going to do now is create another empty. And in this one, it's just going to be called pickup. All right, perfect. So before we actually get into setting up our triggers, I want to make sure that we set up some other things. And we're going to need some variables. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go up here where it says Game Creator, and I'm going to click on Preferences. And then once I click Preferences, what we're going to do is create a variable called isCarrying. Now I already have a variable called isCarrying right here, and but if you're not familiar with that, you can go ahead and create that there. So basically you would name your variable here, hit the plus key, and then you would give it a data type of bool. Okay, and then the other type of variable we're going to need is an object variable. And so it'll be a pickup. So I'm just going to call it pick for now and click the plus key. And what we want to do is make this into a game object. So this is going to let us know, or we're going to be able to tell the system when we have something in our hands and when we don't have something in our hands. And then for the pickup, this is going to be where we assign whatever game object we have in our scene is going to be assigned here, so it knows what we're currently carrying. I'm going to actually close these and get rid of these, but you want to keep yours since I already have an isCarrying variable and my pickup object variable here. All right, so I'm going to close this. Next thing we want to do is go ahead and create a tag, right? So if you click the box or a cube, if you don't have a cube in your scene or an object, go ahead and create one. But I have this cube here and we have a tag called pickup. So what I want to do is, if you don't already have that or don't know how to create tags, just click on add tag, hit this plus key, and go ahead and add your tag. Okay, and then hit save there. And then once you do that, assign the pickup tag to that there. Okay, and do that the same to pretty much any object you need picked up. All right. Okay, so the first trigger we're going to create for this is we're going to check when we're actually close to the object that we want to pick up. And the first thing I want to do is click on this here, this game object. I'm going to go down to game creator, and then I'm going to click on trigger, and then I'm going to name it trigger check object. You go ahead and do it just like that. You can name it whatever you like, but I'm just going to name it this way. Okay. All right, and then the next thing we want to do is make sure we have our trigger set. Let's see here, that's our trigger. Let's make sure. And I do not see it, so I think my gizmos are turned off. There we go. So there is the radius of this particular trigger. So you can change that radius to whatever you want. Just depends on how close you want it to be before it actually affects or knows how close you are to the object. And I'm just going to go ahead and move this up just a little bit. All right, perfect. All right. And then next, what we want to do is change this trigger to base it on tag. So we're going to go to object, and we're going to go all the way down to where it says on tag enter. And then we're going to select the tag pickup. And then that's it there. And then the next thing we want to do is create an action. And then when you hit create action, it's going to create that. It's going to be a child of the trigger. So we're going to click action. And here I'm going to make sure that we have some type of message. So I'm going to do a debug message, and we're going to just say enter tag. All right, great. So every time we get close, based on this radius of this particular sphere, it's going to execute that particular debug message. So let's just take a look and see how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. All right, so we have our player. I'm going to open my console, and then I'm going to run over. And there, so we have enter tag, and every time we get next to an object with that tag, it's going to continue to increase that number. All right, perfect. All right, so far so good. All right, hit play and get back. So the next trigger that we want to create is going to be one that can tell when we're not close to the object itself. So the first thing you want to go ahead and do is click on the pickup object, and then I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to go to game creator trigger, and you want to go ahead and name this not in range, trigger not in range, just like so. All right, and then for this one we're going to do a very similar thing. We're going to go down where object, and then we're going to go to, instead of on tag enter, we want to do on tag exit, right? All right, perfect. And then when we exit the tag, we want it to be exiting the pickup tag. Okay. And now we want to also add a action that basically says that we're outside of that particular thing. So I'm going to ahead and click on action, and I'm going to add an action and a debug message that says out of range. So let's go ahead and type that in. All right, out of range. And I'm just gonna get rid of this here, just like that. All right, great. And so far when we walk up to it, it knows that we entered it, and what we wanna do now is know that we are away from it, okay? So let's go ahead and check to see if that is working properly. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit play. All right, and so when I walk next to it, enter tag, it went up to 5, and let me go ahead and clear it. And let's just go to this one, out of range, enter. So now you can see they're working. So they're 1 to 1. So if I go next, it should say enter tag. And then when I walk away from it, out of range. So that's exactly the behavior that we want. And so that's what we need. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and move on to the next part. All right, so the next trigger that we're going to need for our player will be picking up the object, the actual action of picking up the object. All right, so what I'm going to do is select pickup. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go game creator, and we're going to go to trigger, and I'm just going to type in the word trigger picking up the object or picking up object. You can type however you want to go about that. And so we have that there. All right, perfect. All right, so now when we're actually picking up the object, we need it to trigger that particular action, because now we need to hit a button. So we want to go ahead and change this to an input. I'm going to do this to a key down, and I'm going to make it the letter P on the keyboard. And of course you can set that to your joystick buttons or whatever you need there, but just for simplicity, I'm just going to make it P for pick up. All right, great. All right. Okay, so next what we want to do is go ahead and start putting in the actions for the actual pickup. All right, so I'm going to first go ahead and click on actions. It's going to create that, and it's going to put it right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and look at it from this view, so I can just get only actions as opposed to all of this other information. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click add action. I'm going to first do a debug message, and I want this message to say picking up. All right, picking up object. All right, and so now when we walk over and hit the letter P, it's going to say picking up object. All right, so the next thing we want to do is get the nearest object with the tag pickup. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. We want to get the nearest object with the tag pickup. Okay, great. And it's going to be, the origin is going to be of the player. So basically we want to go ahead and do something like maybe, I don't know, like 2. Okay, perfect. And then we want to change the players if you're able to move the player during that time, because ideally if you pick up an object, you want the player to stop, lean over, and pick up the object. So that's going to require removing control from the player just for a moment. So we're going to go ahead and turn this player is controllable to false. Okay. All right. And let's see here. So what's next will probably be changing the player state. And we're going to change the player state. So you're going to go to add action, and then we're going to go to character, and then we're going to go down to character state. And I already have some values set up, so I'm going to go ahead and push paste, and I'll just show you basically what I already have set up. And basically you're changing the player, and the action is change. You want to make the state an actual animation clip, and then the state clip is going to be carry overhead. Now you don't have carry overhead, but that's going to be some type of animation where you're picking it up, and I'll show you my animation here. And let's see if we can get that going. All right. So basically this is an animation, and all it does is pick up overhead, and that's what we want. We need the animation clip to do exactly that. Okay. And so that is what that particular clip is going to do. We're going to leave everything here as empty, leave the weighted 1, layer 1, and everything kind of defaulted here. All right, perfect. All right, so after we change the player state, we want to do a player look at the pickup. So we're going to go to add action, and you can just type in look, and then you look at. Okay. And so what we can do is the target should be, I believe, the global variable pickup. Okay. And we can just kind of leave this position the way it is. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and minimize these things just to simplify. All right, great. So we're getting there. All right. And so what I'm going to do now is put in a weight here, and I'm going to put it at about 0.5. That should be good enough for a weight. And then what we're going to do is assign our variable, And this is why we need it, because we need to change is carrying to true, because we're now carrying an object. So we're going to set this global variable is carrying to true. And just keep in mind, if this is checked, that means true. If it's not checked, it's false. Okay. All right, perfect. All right. And so now we want to attach the object to the player's hand. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and add that action. So we want to go to character, and at the very top, character attachment. And what we want to do is the character is going to be the player. We want the action of attach, and we want the correct bone. So if you click here, you're going to get all types of bones. On mine, I have it actually selected to the right thumb. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do this right here, right thumb. And then the instance should be the game object. It's going to be the variable, the pickup. Okay. And that should be pretty much it for that. All right, so the next thing we want to do is go ahead and put in a wait. And so I'm going to go ahead and click wait, and I'm going to put just a time of like 1 second. And you can play with anything when it comes to waits. These are just all based on your animations and how quickly you need something done between one action and the next. But I've kind of worked this out to work, but this is just to give you a very broad sense of how it works. So wait 1 second here. And then we're going to change the player state again. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to go to character, change state. And I already have copied that. And so I'm going to go ahead and do player. So you want to set the player, change animation clip, carry overhead idle. So we're changing the clip to carry overhead idle. And we're going to mask out that that particular part, right? Because what's going to happen is you want to be able to walk with your hands up, but your lower body is going to move and walk and jump and whatnot. So you want to be able to mask out basically the top where only your arms are going to be upwards, right? And just to show you that animation, that's what that looks like. Okay, so that's just a basic idle, and that's what we'll look like when we're walking around. Okay. All right. And we'll just leave everything else here at default. Okay. And so next thing we want to do is, remember, we change the player controllable and we can't move. So if we were to try to do this now, you wouldn't be able to move right at that part. So we need to make this player moving again. So I'm going to go ahead and actually click copy, and I'm going to hit paste, and I'm just going to change it to true. So now we can actually move. Okay, perfect. All right, so that's going to be the actions for just picking up the object. All right, so we're going to have to move on to the next trigger. Okay, so our next trigger is going to be basically now putting down the object. So we're going to click on pickup. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create a trigger here, and you can just go ahead and name that. What I'm naming it, put down, put object down. Okay, and then for this, what we're going to need is a condition. Okay, so we're going to add a condition here, and before we do that, we also want to add a button to press. And so in this case, it's going to be the same input that we have for picking up. So I'm going to go key down, and I'm going to click the P until we get to the letter P. Okay, great. All right, so our first condition is going to be when we're actually carrying the object. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is check to see if we're carrying. So we want to add a clause. We're going to do if the variable bool global variable is carrying. So if we are carrying it, so if it's true, if we are currently carrying something, we want to actually do a certain action, right? So in this case, we want to just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to now hit if we are carrying, I'm going to create actions. And then I'm going to go over to my hierarchy, and then I'm going to click on actions. And so next thing I want to do is hit add action. And then I'm going to put in, the first thing I want to do is a debug message. And I'm going to do debug message, and we can do something like putting object down. Right? And these are really good when you're testing. Just know that certain things are working. Okay. All right. And so we're just going to go ahead and do that. All right. So the next thing we want to do, remember, if we're carrying something, if carrying is true, then we need to put this thing down at this point. Okay. All right. So the next action we want to do is, if we're putting something down, we need to stop the player from moving. So we want to go ahead and put in a, let's see here, a character property, and we want to make this false. Okay, so that as soon as we're putting it down, we're not moving anymore. And the next thing we want to do is change the character state. So what we're going to do is go to add action, character state. And as I always do, I'm going to go ahead and just paste this in. But for you, basically you want to change it to player, change it to make it say change animation clip instead of state accent. And you want to pick your animation that's carry put down. And I'll just show you what mine looks like. So play, basically carry, and then put down. Okay. All right. And then everything else is going to be pretty defaulted there. All right, so once we do that, we're going to put in a nice little wait just to give us a little bit of time to do anything. It's just a buffer. All right, and then so now that we're putting the object down, we want to let the system know that, hey, we don't actually hold on. We don't have this in our hand anymore, right? So we want to go ahead and do variable global is carrying to false because we're no longer carrying this object. Okay. The next thing we want to do, since we're no longer carrying it, we need to detach it from our hand. So we want to go ahead and go to character, go to the top, attachment, player, detach. And we want to pick the bone to detach from. So we know that it's going to be the right thumb there. And then that's it for that. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and add another weight here. You don't actually have to, but I do it because I know that we can play around with this weight if needed based on timing. So I'll just put that weight there. And these are just things that you would have to experiment with as you learn. All right. And then the next thing we want to do is change some properties on the actual object. Okay, so this here is going to change the properties of the box when we put it down. And I'm actually thinking about when we're picking it up. Can't remember if I added any particular properties when we actually are picking it up. And I don't necessarily see any, so I'll add some of those there in a minute. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and add that property here. So you go to add actions, Rigidbody. And we're going to pick the global variable. It's going to be the pickup. And since we're putting it down, we need to add these elements back into it. So in this case, we want to add mass. Now, the original mass of this object is going to be 20. So in this case, we're just going to set it to be 20. Okay. And we can obviously leave gravity on. I don't believe it's kinematic. I think that's off, so we want to match it up with its current state. So great. So now we're basically giving those properties back to that object. All right, and then what I'm going to do is actually go back to our pickup part and add those here. So basically, where it says global pickup, right after global pickup, we want to go ahead and add that rigid body. So we're going to add rigid body. We can move this by clicking this the side part here, click and drag. We're going to move that right there. We're going to change this to global variable. We're going to do pickup. And then since we're picking it up, we want to remove any type of rigid body elements from this object, because it kind of messes with the player if you run around with it like that. So we're going to leave that like that. And so I just wanted to change that and make sure that we have that put in there. All right. So we can get back to finishing our actual put down actions. All right. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and put another weight. Let's see here, weight. We'll do no, we won't actually do a weight there. Actually, we're going to do a reset player state, actually. So let's go ahead and do that. We want to just go to character, and we'll just go ahead to player state. And you can do a reset. Okay, so we're going to reset it back to its original. Remember, when you're doing is you're putting it down. So therefore you want to go back to what it was before you picked up anything, right? So after that, once you do that, you want to just go ahead and go to character, and you want to change the character properties to true for character movement, or is controllable, because now that we put it down, we want to be able to move again, because if we don't change this, we'll be stuck at this point. Basically, we won't be able to move after putting everything down. All right, great. All right, so we're almost there, but we just have a few things to make all this works, because none of these triggers are really communicating with each other just yet. We have a few things working, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit play just so we can mess around and just see what's not working and why. All right, let's see here. So we have our player, and here's my console here. So if I walk next to this, of course, we enter the tag, we walk away, we out of range, right? And so ideally, if you were to be in this tag, you would want it to pick it up. So if we look at our triggers here, we know that if we hit the P button, it should play all of these, all of this information here, right? And all these doing is that. And so the only thing we have here for a condition is if carrying is set to true, do this, else false, else don't do anything. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit the P button, and it doesn't do anything, right? Why is that? Well, let's find out. All right, so what we're going to basically need is some conditions set for all this to kind of work together, right? So the first thing I want to do is go back to my check object, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to do a game creator, and then I'm going to do a condition. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. And what I'm going to do is click conditions, and I'll just actually use the one that is connected. So we'll just get rid of this one, and then we'll just rename this one to regular conditions. Great. All right, so now when we enter this tag, we already are checking that it is been entered. So now we need a condition. Okay. All right, great. So the first condition is, remember, if we're entering a tag and you currently don't have anything in your hand, so what's the condition? If the variable bool, global variable, is carrying, so if you're not carrying anything, so if it's false, we need you to do something. Now, what we want to do, and it's a little weird, but what I'm going to do is create an action. And in this action, we're going to set active. A certain game object. And we're going to set active the picking up object trigger. Okay. So we want to set that to be active. Okay. All right. So basically, when we walk into this, it's going to make this active, and then it will give us the ability to pick up the object. Okay, because what we don't want is that trigger to fire off when we're not next to an object. Right now, it'll just fire off because why? On key down P. So it'll just fire off for no reason at all. Okay. And just to prove that, let's go ahead and just see if that is actually what's happening. Because remember, this trigger basically checks for, hey, on tag exit. Okay, that's great. This one checks for on key down pick up, but it has conditions. The conditions have to be if you're carrying. But this particular trigger, picking up an object, will just pick it up regardless, or it will try to pick up something. Okay, so let's just go ahead and hit play and just show you that. So I'm just standing here. I'm not next to technically anything. And I'll just hit the P key, and it's going to pick up something that's not there. Okay, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that out. And so we have our conditions, and we want to now, first thing, we want to pick up object. We want to make this, set it as inactive. So now if we try to pick up anything, it won't. Okay. All right. And so let's check on a few other things that we may have kind of overlooked here. So let's hit play. All right, great. And so now if we hit the P key, it's not doing anything because we're not next to an object. So that's working pretty well. So if I go over to this object and I hit the P key, that's working, right? But here's the issue. Tag name is null or empty. And what did we miss? So let's go ahead and hit clear. And I have an idea of already what it is. So when picking up the object, let's go to actions. Get the nearest object with tag. We need to set that up. Okay. So pick up. So we need to do that. All right. So that should get us the ability to pick it up. And then we should be able to continue through once that is done. So let's go ahead and check to see how that is working. Okay. So we're moving around. All right, let's walk over. Tag entered. Out of range. All right, and if I hit the P key, that's working. Cool. And so now we're running around with our box in our hand. All right, great. Now if I push P to put it down, we have an issue because there's one reason why this happened. Because remember, when the condition is if we're carrying, set to false. If carrying is false, then set this to true. Okay, so now here's the thing. We don't have it set. We need to reset this back to false when you put it down. Okay, so let's see here just a second. Let's get to change that. So what we're going to do is go to where it says not in range, and we're going to go to actions, and we're going to set the let's see here, we're going to set this to false. So let's see here. Let's double check, making sure everything is working properly as I believe it should be. All right, and so we walk over here. All right, so you see that should be, when you walk away from it, the picking up shouldn't be active anymore. So we need that to work. So in the not in range, we need to set that to active. And we're just gonna take the picking up here, and we're gonna set it to false. Okay. All right, and so let's go ahead and play. All right, and let's go ahead. So now let's go ahead and clear that. And so now we're away. Picking up object is grayed out, so that means it's inactive. Now it's active. Now it's not active. And so it knows if we're there doing that properly. And if I hit pick up, that's working pretty good. And let's see if we have any other issues. And so we did. There we go. And so we're able to pick up that object and put it down. Obviously, there's an issue with the rigid body, so we can go ahead and fix that. Let's see where that issue is showing up. All right, so let's see here. All right, so let's see what the issue is with the box not with its gravity. And if I click on actions, because we know it's when we put down the object. So if we go to put down actions, we can take a look at the change global properties for the pickup. And so we have the mass on, gravity on, and we need to have is kinematic. So what we're doing is we're saying is kinematic. The object does have that system in it, but what we need to do is make sure that it's false. So we don't want it true. We just need it to be stating it as false, because the original object is also is kinematic, which is false. Okay, so we can take a look at that now. All right, and we'll just take a look. All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit clear, and we'll just take a look at how everything really works together. All right, so we have our player. If we walk next to this object, enter tag, walk away, out of range. Same thing with this one. And as we walk next to it, you can see that it's just adding a number 2 to it. Great, perfect. All right, so let's walk next to this one, hit the letter P. We're picking up our object, which is nice. We can jump around with it, all of that. And then we can go ahead and push the P key again, and there you have it. We are able to pick up that object. Let's see if we can do the same thing to this one. Perfect. And we can do the same thing to that one. Nice. All right, that is working as it should. And just to take a look, so just so you can see what's happening here in the game creator preferences and your variables, when we're walking around, as soon as we click on the P, it's going to assign box 1. So that's great. Hit that P, it puts it down. It doesn't get rid of the box, it just leaves it. It's the last box we picked up. But if we hit the P key, because we're not next to that object, it's not going to do anything. So we're good there. So as soon as we come over here, it doesn't change until we actually have it in our hand. Boom. So now we're good to go. Okay. And so now we can move this box over here as needed. All right, great. All right. So that's pretty much it, but there may be a couple other things we want to take a look at. For instance, the box. So right now it's a bit on my face, and maybe you want it in a different position. So let's take a quick look and see how we could maybe move the box up in the hands and reposition those things. All right. So I'm gonna hit play. All right. So when we're picking up the object, remember that's what we're trying to think. We're thinking about the position of the box at that point. So we want to look at the pickup object there. So actions, and it's going to be more than likely in the area where we're attaching it. And so what you want to do is look at the space, position, and rotation. So we know X, Y, and Z, right? And so we know Y should be in the up direction to the player. So let's just take a test and see. So I'm going to hit 5 on the Y, and let's just see what that gives us. I'm going to go ahead and hit play. All right, so if I were to go over to this box now and hit the P key, it moved it that way, and that's the Y. And it may be self in terms of the actual box. So now we need to play with how that's actually going to work. I'm not sure if it gives us real time, so we're going to have to kind of gauge that. So it may not be on the Y. You might want to mess with the position on the X. You might want to mess with the Z, or maybe change it to world position. So anything there would probably change that. So if we do world position, let's see if that makes any difference. All right, and so now we changed the world position. Let's see what it does this time. Okay, of course that's not going to work. So it's definitely going to be based on self. So we're just going to go ahead and end that. All right, let's take another stab at that. So we know it's a self, and let's just put this at 0. We're going to do it on the X. We can do like a 0.2, I don't know, -4, -1, I don't know. So let's just take a look at that and see. So, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit play there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit play and go ahead and do this. All right, so it looks a little better. So to get this a little better, what you can do is just go into your scene view. I'm going to hit pause on that. Go into your scene view and just move it into position, right? And it's going to be based on the object itself, so we can kind of get it where you want it. So we can rotate it and move it into place. So if you want it to be kind of like this and maybe kind of like that, move it down into the hands. Just depends on what you're trying to do. So let's say we want it like that. We hit play or pause, unpause it. And so that's how it will run around. But then you want them to pick it up like that, right? So that's the position it's at. So we're looking at a 0.5, -2, -1. So really more of a 0.5. So if we were to do that here, let's go ahead and do that to that again. So we'll just go back to our actions. We'll go to a 0.5, -2, -1, give or take. And if you want to actually write down those numbers to the T, you can do it that way. And let's see if it gets us in a better position. All right, so let's take a look now. I'm gonna hit the P key. All right, there we go. And so now it runs around a little better and you can pick it up and it is in the right position, which is pretty nice. And he's not covered up on his head. And if we run by this box, I can put that one down, walk over this one, pick that one up, and there we go. And we can put this one down. Great, perfect. All right. All right, great. That's pretty awesome. All right, so that's pretty much it for picking up an object and using Game Creator to do it. It's been pretty fun. I know that's a lot here. Just to recap, let's take a look at all of our triggers and all of our actions here, and just to understand exactly what we did. So the first thing is we had a player in our scene. What we did is we put the player here. We set up a couple of boxes. We created two variables, two variables, basically is carrying as a bool, and then we have a variable pickup as a game object. Okay, and then what we did was we created a empty game object, called it mechanics, and then we created another empty game object, and the mechanic would be a pickup mechanic. Okay, and then we created some triggers. The first trigger, generally speaking, is one to check when we enter the tag. And then we created an action to say that we entered that particular tag or within that range of that object. On there, we have a condition. This condition ultimately says, is carrying? If carrying is false, then we want to set active picking up. So basically, in other words, when we walk over to this box, we want to make it so that we can pick it up, okay? Which is why we need to initially make sure that it's set active to inactive, so that when we get close, it turns on, and we walk away, it actually turns off. And so that's all that this condition is doing, okay? And that's pretty much it for that, setting it active. All right, the not in range trigger. That trigger is on tag exit. We want to pick the pickup. We have action here where it's a debug just to check that we're out of range, and we're basically setting inactive. Okay, and so when we're out of range, it turns this off so that we're not picking up an object. Okay, all right, and then in this trigger, it's picking up the object. So basically, what are we going to do when we press the button? Okay, so on key down, P. Now, of course, if you need to do multiple buttons or a different button for your controller, one for the keyboard, one for your like a joystick 360 controller, you can just add another trigger here by doing add component and do a trigger, and then you would just simply put in a new key code, and you would just move the action here into that one, and it just shares that action. And if you look here, we have a debug, which simply says, hey, we're picking up an object. This is going to get the nearest object. This is going to change whether or not we are moving or not. This is going to do and change your player state. This is going to, of course, change the objects, you looking at the object when that pickup happens. This is going to change the Rigidbody to off, so you want to make sure that that's completely turned off. You're going to wait 5 seconds before moving on to the making this value as is carrying. So now that we've done all this stuff and we're actually picking up an object, we want to set it to is carrying. And then here we're going to attach it. We're going to wait a second, and waiting a second, and we're basically going to do a animation clip here, and we're going to mask off the top part of the body so that only the animation clip remains with the hands up. And then we're going to make the player movable again. And then, of course, we have our last trigger. For the key down P, we have conditions and everything here. Debug, player is controllable to false. Change the state, await. Change the bool to not carrying. So are you carrying? That would be false. We are not carrying. We want to detach it, wait, change the object's Rigidbody, reset everything back, and make us move again. Whew, that is a lot to take in. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I enjoy doing this. It's fun to do, and I've been wanting to make this particular video for a while. I needed to keep it on file for records so that I wouldn't forget how to do it. And so I felt now would be a good time to put it out there, and also to hopefully it's useful to anyone watching. If you ever need to pick up different size boxes, you basically could just create a new pickup. You can duplicate this and then rename it heavy or light or whatever, and then you can kind of change different aspects of it to suit your need. Or say, for instance, it's a different type of box or a different type of object that you're carrying differently. So in this one, if you were to duplicate this pickup, you would go to, say, the character state in the animation and change the animation to be a different thing based on the pickup. And that just means you're going to have to do different tags and different things. So basically almost like repeating this tutorial for different boxes and different things. So anyway, you can use your imagination for that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video during this tough time in everyone's life. I would imagine everyone's dealing with things differently. But hope you guys enjoyed the video, and feel free to leave me some comments if you guys enjoyed the video, if it was useful. Love to see what you guys are doing with it. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm here. And of course, when things get tough, just keep going, keep doing what you got to do, and you'll make it through. Things will be tough. You know, life is tough. And you know, as I always say, and I really mean it, never give up and keep moving forward. Peace.